Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Wes Nisker is the co-founder and editor of the international Buddhist journal Inquiring Minds. He's practiced Vipassana meditation for 30 years. He's the author of Buddha's Nature, Evolution as a Guide to Enlightenment, Crazy Wisdom, a Romp through the Philosophies of East and West, and The Big Bang, the Buddha, and the Baby Boom. In addition to leading a regular sitting group in Berkeley, he teaches classes in meditation and philosophy at Spirit Rock and at other locations around the country. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to share this morning with you. I've been here a couple times before. This is my third visit, and the group has grown quite a bit, I think. I want to start by reading a bit of doggerel that I wrote for my journal. It's called Why I Meditate, and it was inspired by a poem by Allen Ginsberg of the same name. Why I meditate. I meditate because I suffer. I suffer, therefore I am. I am, therefore I meditate. I meditate because there are so many other things to do. I meditate because when I was young it was all the rage. I meditate because Siddhartha Gautama, Bodhidharma, Marco Polo, the British Raj, Carl Jung, Alan Watts, Allen Ginsberg, Alfred E. Newman et al. I meditate because evolution gave me a big brain, but it didn't come with an instruction manual. I meditate because I have all the information I need. I meditate because the largest colonies of living beings, the coral reefs, are dying. I meditate because I want to touch deep time, where the history of humanity can be seen as just an evolutionary adjustment period. I meditate because life is too short and sitting slows it down. I meditate because life is too long and I need an occasional break. I meditate because I want to experience the world as Rumi does, or Walt Whitman, or Mary Oliver. I meditate because now I know that enlightenment doesn't exist, so I can relax. I meditate because of the Dalai Lama's laugh. I meditate because there are too many advertisements in my head, and I'm erasing all but the very best of them. I meditate because I want to remember that I'm perfectly human. I meditate because I love Jack Kerouac. I meditate sometimes because my heart is breaking. I meditate sometimes so that my heart will break. I meditate because a Vedanta Hindu master once told me that in Hindi, my name Niskar means non-doer. I meditate because I'm growing old and want to become more comfortable with emptiness. I meditate because Robert Thurman called it an evolutionary sport, and I want to be on the home team. I meditate because I'm composed of 100 trillion cells, and from time to time I need to reassure them that we're all in this together. I meditate because it's such a great relief to spend time ignoring myself. I meditate because my country spends more money on weapons than all other nations in the world combined. If I had more courage, I'd probably set myself on fire. I meditate because I want to discover the fifth Brahma Vihara, the divine abode of awe, and then I'll go down in history as a great spiritual adept. I meditate because I'm building myself a bigger and better perspective, and occasionally I need to add a new window. Why I meditate, just a few of the reasons. There are others. So, this morning I'm going to talk about your mind and my mind, our mind. because it is really a collective thing that we share. Particular organ, brain, nervous system at a particular moment in evolution. We share a particular culture that determines a lot about our minds. So it really is a collective discussion about this thing that creates our reality, or the thing we perceive as our reality. I think the most significant shift in my life that has come out of my meditation practice over the years has been my relationship to my own mind. We're still friends, but we're not quite so codependent as we used to be. I'll never forget my first meditation retreat where I understood two very important things about my mind, and this happens to almost anyone who goes on any kind of retreat for any length of time. Two very significant revelations, actually. The first one was the discovery of mindfulness itself. I was 27 or 28 years old when I first started meditating. I had a good degree from an American university. I'd done some therapy. I had done some Freudian Gestalt therapy. But nobody in my culture had ever told me that you could actually develop this ability to step out of your own drama and simply observe it. This quality that we call mindfulness, that has been called mindfulness, which is a huge discovery. It's a huge discovery. It's like a double consciousness, that you can be aware of your own mind and your own awareness, that you can actually track yourself from what Christians sometimes call the higher self, or the witness. The second revelation, though, and the one that really was shocking to me, was that I'm not in control of my mind. The instructions were simple: sit there, just pay attention to your breath. Don't consciously or willfully do anything else. So I start paying attention to my breath, and voila, my mind continues to think and make plans and have regrets and fantasies without consulting me. I mean, it just went on. My first meditation retreat, I had just come from being a news director at a rock and roll radio station in San Francisco, and that may have something to do with the fact that first retreat, the first couple retreats that I did, my mind insisted on singing to me during meditation. And not New Age meditation music. It was, pop songs with good hooks. And they would come into my head randomly. I don't know, something would trigger them, some cue. And they would repeat over and over. I thought I was going crazy. I could not turn them off. Sometimes a song would pop into my head that was on an album side that I was familiar with. My mind would track through the album side, sometimes flip it over, play the other side. It was insidious, really. A number of people I know I've talked to about this say they have had this phenomena, which I call jukebox karma. It's like you listen over the years and it gets imprinted, especially, in combination with drugs. The music, goes in deep. But this was a real revelation. I mean, before I began meditating, I was completely lost in the contents of my mind. And still now, when I go to a retreat, or almost any time that I sit down to meditate, I am suddenly reminded that I have been totally lost in my own drama, without any sense of awareness of it, just rolling in it, completely unconscious, you might say, lacking any consciousness of it. This is a Tibetan sage, Tulku Urgyen, 20th century. The stream of thoughts surges through the mind of an ordinary person, often called dark diffusion. In this state, there is no knowledge whatsoever about who's thinking, where the thought comes from, where the thought disappears. One has not even caught the scent of awareness, and the person is totally and mindlessly carried away by one thought after another. This is the case for most people. And this is the thing that meditation is designed to cure, really, is to break through that mesmerizing stream of our own mind, the products of our own mind. Of course, our civilization has come to emphasize thinking. That's what we get graded on in school. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," showing how much we had become identified with the thinking mind. I think Descartes should have said, "I think, therefore I think I am." And actually what he should have said is, "I breathe, therefore I am," because, we can think. We can breathe without thinking, but we can't think without breathing. I think it's somewhat ironic that I spent the first half of my life learning how to think. And now I'm spending the second half of my life learning how to ignore my thinking. What was I thinking? Now, I don't want to give the impression that thoughts are bad. Thoughts are, it's our genius. Our genius as a species. We make up these complex symbols and that we agree upon, and they can be expressed in, sounds, and we use this ability to pass information back and forth and directions and discoveries and then pass them on to the next generation. It's a brilliant adaptive system. But as a species, we've grown to sort of overemphasize or over-romanticize it. We've grown to believe that our thinking makes us superior to the rest of creation. This is Darwin from his secret notebooks. Why is thought, which is a secretion of the brain, deemed to be so much more wonderful than, say, gravity, which is a property of matter? It is only our arrogance, our admiration of ourselves. And Stephen Jay Gould said, "An octopus doesn't go around being proud of its 8 arms." What they are saying is that the mind, the thinking mind, is basically an adaptive tool. It's an evolutionary design that helps this particular species read the environment at a distance. And in fact, in time. Remember, plan ahead. A brilliant adaptation, no doubt, but nonetheless an adaptation. And that is actually how the Buddha saw it. The Buddha, if you look at the Buddhist texts, the thinking mind is the 6th sense. No more or less important than sight, which also allows us to read the environment at a distance. It is very liberating to begin to understand thinking as a biological function and as an adaptive function. It helps to both demystify and depersonalize our thinking mind, which causes us so much suffering because we think of it as so individual, as so much ours, as so much self-created, when really it's created by evolution. 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, people were sitting around, guys were probably thinking, what color should I paint my spear, and who's going on the hunt tomorrow, and is anybody watching the fire? Now we think about our 501k and the grocery list and but it's basically the same stuff. It's survival stuff. In fact, sometime, very interesting little experiment, take a session of your meditation and see how many of your thoughts can be somehow placed under the category of survival. Sex, money, shelter, place in the pecking order. I mean, it's all there. It's all there. I have found it very interesting and useful and liberating as a follower of this path, as a Buddhist practitioner, to understand what science and in particular cognitive science, neuroscience, evolutionary science, what they are saying about our brain and how it works and what they are discovering. It is radical, and it totally supports the Buddha's vision of how things are in the world. You know, we're looking at our minds with mindfulness sometimes. The scientists are looking at our brains with these PET scans and CAT scans and MRIs and squids, the quantum interference device, I forget what it is, the superconducting quantum interference device. Anyway, they're really quite shocked at what they're finding. First of all, they're finding that most of our mental processes go on beneath our conscious awareness, on what neuroscientist Daniel Dennett called the subpersonal level. In other words, most of our interpretations of the world and even the motivations and the carrying out of our behaviors are often done without our taking part in them. They go on beneath our awareness, and consciousness comes in late in the game. You know, the psychologists were telling us that for about a century. You know, that really there were all these forces in the subconscious that were really ruling our lives, and but now the cognitive scientists and the more materialist scientists are really showing that that's the case, based on some elaborate experiments. Here, a now very famous experiment by a cognitive scientist named Benjamin Libet shows that the brain makes decisions for us. He wired subjects to monitors, galvanized skin response and brain pictures, and he told the subjects to push a button whenever they felt like it, just randomly push a button. And he discovered that the brain goes into a kind of readiness preparation. The brain starts doing this a half a second before the subject becomes conscious of making the decision to do it. In other words, the brain starts, the consciousness comes in later, says, I'm doing this, when actually it was the brain that was doing it. The brain is the reason that the brain can do this and fool us into thinking we're doing it. The brain is a complete wonder. It processes an estimated 11 million bits of information a second. All the information coming from inside of your body, outside world. It's a phenomenal organ. And the complexity is quite astounding. And this is really interesting, that the brain is made up of all these different little compartments that do the processing. These little groups of cells, little brain regions. For instance, loud sounds and quiet sounds are handled in different subsectors of the auditory center of the brain. The verbal areas of the brain are so specialized. Nouns and verbs get processed by different groups of cells. In the visual cortex, one group of cells gets activated when you see a face, and another group gets activated when you see a face looking at you. And what the scientists say is that all these little brain regions are impersonal, all do their jobs. They receive these electrical and chemical signals, and then based on the strength and the coding, they send these signals on to where they're supposed to go. As one scientist says, these different agencies of the brain have no more self or soul than your liver. So all these little worker parts of the brain don't know who they're working for. And they don't know what the outcome is supposed to be. They just do their jobs. A kind of example, someone's coming towards you on the sidewalk. You're walking down the street, someone's coming towards you. Streams of photons hit your retina of your eye, get turned into electrical signals which go to the visual cortex. And the brain all parts of the brain are on a constant resonating communication with each other. So immediately the visual cortex, the signals are sent to the memory center as the image is being assembled. Is this familiar? Does it look like somebody we know? Maybe not. Go to the emotional center, the limbic system. Do we like this? Is this going to be good? It goes to the behavioral center where, get ready for some kind of movement here. All these centers of the brain are notified. All this information is coordinated with all the other kinds of information that's coming in, like your intention. How strong was your intention to walk down the street and get to where you're going without being interrupted, etc. In the end, whether you wave to this person or cross the street to miss them is nothing more than a brain jerk reaction, is what I call it. A brain jerk reaction. Based on your past experience, your past conditioning, and evolutionary demands, something will happen within you and without you. Cognitive scientist Marvin Minsky. Just as we can walk without thinking, we can also think without thinking. As meditators, I don't know how much experience you've had, but you start to get to understand this. You really start to see it. You start to see both how the mind moves with desire or aversion, and how the thinking comes, these clusters of thoughts, not only independent of your will, but against your will. And how this whole flow of mind just continually pours through you based on your own early conditioning, your psychology, and your biology, the instincts that live in you. Now, the scientists say that most of the stuff that flows through our mind has to do with survival, as I was talking about. And here's how a neurologist named Melvin Connor expresses some of the recent studies of the brain. Quote, "The motivational portions of the brain, particularly the hypothalamus, have characteristics relevant to the apparent chronic nature of human dissatisfaction. Experiments on the lateral hypothalamus suggest that our chronic internal state will be a vague mixture of anxiety and desire, best described by the phrase, 'I want,' spoken with or without an object for the verb." I want. That's the setting of our brains. Now, you might think that that's depressing news. It is a little, but the fact that we can know it is really the beginning of our freedom. And when you sit in meditation and you see the mind moving constantly in this state of dissatisfaction, you begin to understand it. You begin to break your identification with it. This is not I, me, mine. This is the nature of, it's evolution's brain. It's doing its thing, and you can learn to actually calm it, be okay with it, and find what the Buddha called a different kind of happiness. The setting in the brain, the Buddha recognized it, and he called these instincts underlying tendencies. But he made it the basis of his second and third noble truth. The second noble truth being that the reason that we suffer so much is desire. Meaning this desire and aversion, this constant dissatisfaction in our minds. And the third noble truth, which is that we can work with it. We can understand it and work with it. That this desire and aversion that is in there, that our suffering comes not because we haven't fulfilled our latest desire. Our suffering comes because of the endless wheel of desire that goes around. You know, it's like life is a little like Chinese food. You know? It's great, but, 15 minutes later you're hungry again. Understanding that I think is really a revolution, and I think that the Dharma meditation is a revolution in consciousness, and we're all really in on the early stages of it. I mean, 2,500 years ago, in biological time, as the blink of an eye, humans are just waking up to their own condition. I mean, when you think about it, Freud and Darwin and Jung and Einstein, and they're our contemporaries. This is a whole new ballgame that we're involved in. One of the most interesting things that happened in my meditation practice over the years is when I started dropping down from the thinking mind and into my body and feeling that there was almost always some kind of emotion accompanying the thinking, especially the repetitive clusters of thoughts and the insistent thinking. When I would get lost, if I would come and check my body, I would realize that there was some mood that had invaded or had taken me over. And coming into the body and actually feeling that there's an engine of the thinking mind is run by the engine of the limbic system. That emotions have been around for 100 million years. Thinking has only been around for a few 100,000 maybe at the most. We're just learning how to think, but the limbic system, the emotional system, is very heavily wired. And the more we come, I've found the more you can come in and experience the engine, the emotional engine of your thinking, the more liberating it is. We can get very identified as an individual with the thinking brain, but with the emotions, fear, sadness, anxiety, all that stuff it's generic. There's a way in which when you start to feel your life being lived on that level, you gain what I call evolutionary intelligence. You become more identified with your species self than you do with your individual drama. Evolution is such a good way to understand the mind. Probably one of the most important discoveries of the 20th century, and not heralded nearly enough. In the 60s, Dr. Paul MacLean at NIMH was studying the evolution of the brain and discovered that we don't have a brain. We have 3 brains, and that they develop in each of us in the womb in the same order that they developed in nature. We get the brain stem first, the reptilian brain. And over that grows the limbic system, the mammalian brain, and then over that eventually grows the new human brain, or the neo-mammalian brain. And MacLean also discovered that one brain doesn't override the other brains. In fact, they're very intimately connected. And in fact, the reptilian and mammalian brains are really fully engaged. I mean, they work 100%. We only use 30% maybe of our new human brain, at least the capacity. And there's some speculation that we use the new human brain mostly to make excuses for the behavior generated by the other 2 brains. Very, very likely possibility. And it's funny because they've done studies now with split brain people with split brain injuries, and they found that the left hemisphere weaves everything that we do into the story that we tell about ourselves. I mean, we want to think of ourselves as an integrated being and have meaning and stuff. And the left hemisphere is continually weaving everything that we do into this narrative. But as to whether it makes any sense outside of our own brain is another question. Okay, you have to bow to your reptilian, your lower brains, your reptilian brain. You got to bow because it's taking care of your body temperature, your hunger, your sex drive, your metabolism, the whole. And if you had to consciously do that, you wouldn't have any time to think. So, what the upshot is? Well, so who makes the decisions in your life, huh? What's becoming clear is that you are not necessary. And in fact, you can't be found. There was a Time magazine cover story in the summer of 1995. It was called In Search of the Mind. I'm sure many people were shocked to realize that the mind was lost, and even more shocked to realize that the scientists couldn't find it. I thought this article was so interesting. The last paragraph, I cut it out, and I've been reading it ever since to people. I love it. This is the ending of this cover story. Despite our every instinct to the contrary, it seems that consciousness is not some entity inside the brain that corresponds to self, some kernel of awareness that runs the show. After more than a century of looking for it, brain researchers have concluded that such a self simply does not exist. This is in Time magazine. Why wasn't there a nationwide panic of some kind? The self does not exist, and the scientists have discovered, turns out the brain is a self-organizing system, and it doesn't need you. Now, I was wondering whether the scientists who were now beginning to understand the processes of the human brain would be feeling some degree of self-liberation themselves, to see this. Maybe not. For a few years ago, I interviewed, for the Inquiring Mind, I interviewed a very renowned cognitive scientist and Tibetan Buddhist, the late Francisco Varela. He said he didn't think many scientists got it. He was a Tibetan Buddhist, and he got it. He told me many cognitive scientists close the door of the lab after studying all day about the selflessness of the brain and go right back to their normal self-absorbed life. He said the best science can do is give a stamp of validity to the notion of selflessness. And his conclusion: you can have an intellectual understanding of anatta being the Buddhist Pali word for selflessness. You can have an intellectual understanding of anatta while the emotional root that weaves that understanding into your life remains absent. And that's really what we're doing, partly in meditation and especially in more advanced practices, working with this idea of no self. And it's not just seeing through the boundaries of self. It's seeing that we are much more than this individual drama, and in fact that we are much bigger selves than we think we are. That we are actually, I like to put it, our individual human life is first and foremost life, with all the constraints and glories that all life forms have. I mean, I think that, when you come and sit down and meditate, I always like to, you start with the breath. The breath is not just an object for you to concentrate on. It's a sign of life. And considering that you were dead for a long time before you were alive, and you're probably going to be dead for a long time after you die, that this is it's very special to feel and let the fact of life reverberate in you. It can bring such a sense of delight and wonder. I mean, the mystery is right here. The mystery that nobody understands is right here, as close as your breath. We are first and foremost, the individual human life is first and foremost life. Secondly, it is human, and only thirdly and narrowly is it individual. We share 99.999139% of our DNA with each other. The IQ and the personality, and it's all just a thin coat of paint over the basic design. Anyway, in meditation, we can begin to understand and weave our understanding into the emotional root of our lives, and really learn to regard our individual drama with less pathos and less striving and less fear and less anxiety. I know of no other way to do it than this process of meditation. There's some pills you can take but they don't heighten your awareness. They block out parts of it. Anyway, I'll just, we have time for some questions and stuff. So let me just end with this little, the disciple coming to Bodhidharma, the great Bodhidharma who brought Buddhism from India to China. The disciple comes and says, "Please help me quiet my mind." Bodhidharma says, "Okay, bring me your mind and I'll quiet it." And after a moment, the disciple says, "But I can't find my mind." And Bodhidharma says, "There, I've quieted for you." So we have time for some questions, and then I have one more poem I can end with here.
Okay.
This is sort of a far-field question, but I'm wondering if you can talk a little about how your Buddhist practice has affected your writing or your process as a writer.
I find that when I'm on retreat is the most fertile time in my sort of creative life, and it's sort of like it does what drugs used to do. It sort of loosens the habitual connections in the mind, I think, and it allows deeper stuff to come through and different connections to come through. It's always a temptation, to take my computer and sit, go hide in the bathroom or something. But I take notes though. I find it's really, really powerful. In fact, I'm co-leading with Mayumi Oda and Anna Douglas creativity retreat at Spirit Rock in September, a week, and people bring the stuff that they're working on. It's kind of like a half and half, and we sit in the morning, and then in the afternoon people go off and paint or write, or last year we had a trombonist in the woods. Yeah.
I'm just reading John Zabit-Zinn, I think I have it right, Coming to Our Senses, and I find it absolutely brilliant, just as I enjoyed your talk very much. It's not my idea, it's in his book that many of us are ready to take a quantum leap into something that might be described as neuroscience Dharma. As wonderful as all my teachers have been all of these decades, well, I hate to say that I've outgrown them because that isn't true. I've loved them so much.
Yes.
But it's coming together for the first time, in my opinion, in a comprehensible way.
Absolutely.
We can read it. And
Yeah.
John Zabit-Zen just makes it so clear.
Right.
I'm just in tears thinking about it, as a matter of fact, because there it is. Now, I don't know exactly where to take it, so I guess my question is, who's doing retreats in this area? Have we outgrown like Omega Institute in Esalen? Is there a website? It still looks like sort of an unconnected conglomerate of people who have bits and pieces of it all, but it has not yet become a magnificent work of cosmic art.
Right. Well, I'll attempt to answer your questions by saying that, first of all, this is brand new. The last 25, 30 years of Buddhism coming to the West is just a brand new thing. And that what is really exciting to me, and to I think a lot of people, is the meeting of science and Eastern wisdom traditions. I sometimes think that it's just a quirky little theory that the world was divided into the two hemispheres of the brain, and we got the left hemisphere. How do we understand the world or truth? You go out and you take things apart and you see how they work, and analyze everything. And for some reason, the Asian wisdom seems to focus on. It seems to be more receptive, holistic thinking, more not so human-centered or this era-centered, human history-centered. There are vast numbers of universes, and they just keep rolling along. And anyway, it's a very exciting time, I think. And the Dalai Lama is holding these conferences with scientists. It's just starting to happen, and I don't think that we give up our old. I mean, the teachers who are teaching sort of pure Dharma without the overlay of any kind of science. I mean, that has its place and its impact as well. I don't know a lot of teachers who are teaching the two things. I am. You go ahead and call out the names.
I believe in the latest Tricycle magazine is a short article on emergence, the phenomenon of emergence, and what you're talking about. You didn't use the word emergence, but the notion that consciousness is an emergent phenomenon. Could you comment on this concept of emergence?
No, I don't know much about it. I've heard it talked about.
Well, Stephen Johnson has a book called Emergent. He's his popularizer. And he talks about ant colonies and how an ant might be programmed. If you don't have any food, you're not carrying any food, but you approach an ant who has food, you're programmed to go straight because the implication is that he's coming from a source of food. If you approach another ant and it doesn't have food, you're programmed to go right. Now, if you repeat these simple operations over and over and over again, like on a computer, it gets simulated, you will wind up with a trail leading from the ant colony to the food, as if they knew or had, this concept of intelligence, when it's really just some simple programming that's repeated over and over and over again. And I thought, wow, as a metaphor for this sort of complex systems working together and repeating over time, things emerge that appear to be designed.
By who?
Yeah. Well, it's evolution,
Right. I now pray to the artist formerly known as God.
I'm curious about something. One of the things that I know has come up in your life, and certainly is a major thread in my life, is humor as a mechanism or a path of separating myself from desire and aversion and even personality and individuality and all those things, because it opens up a tiny, tiny, tiny space between what I take to be reality in myself and some other possibility. But my question is as follows. I noticed that I get so much pleasure over the years. I've gotten so much pleasure out of the humor that I'm curious about the very attachment I've gotten, or the very reward mechanism that comes about from the practice of humor. So
I wouldn't worry about it. I just
you just sink into the play.
I think it's just a gift if you have it. I mean, what Wavy Gravy says: if you don't have a sense of humor, it's just not funny.
My response to that would be that one day I was driving in Berkeley, and unfortunately I was looking to see if a friend of mine was on the corner, and I bumped the car ahead of me, and that car bumped the car ahead of him. And so when I went to engage in this process, the person who was right in front of me was freaking out, calling his wife and all that stuff, because he said, oh my God, I'm driving the camp car, I know they're going to blame me, blah, blah, blah. And I looked. I'd never seen or met this person before, but I did say, it's totally my fault. I'll take total responsibility. Let's exchange names. And of course, he gave his name. It was Wavy Gravy. And so I kind of dedicated myself to keep him out of the sequence of actions. So this actually came to a court case, and he was just out of it. We never brought up his name. It was as if he had not even been there.
Right.
It was an interesting experience.
The judge would have thrown it out if his name had come up. But I think, sometimes I advise, when I teach and I look out, retreats, and I look out and everybody's so grim, and it's sort of like, I say, why don't you just make this mindfulness, make it, put that little smile of the Buddha on it. Just don't, it's bemusement at your own condition, at our common condition. Life on this planet is not a great deal. It's not a, you didn't read the small print in the lease on life. It's not a real pretty picture. So to keep that kind of bemused quality as you kind of struggle with yourself and try to find some sanity and some center, it's really useful to have a sense of humor. Yeah.
Did I hear you make a comment saying you now pay to the artist formerly known as God? Were you being a comic, or is that true?
I'll let you say.
Because in all of this, I had a bodywork teacher once who said, it helps to think of the brain as in the body and the body as in the mind. And that the mind is just this phenomenal sphere, dimension of mystery that we don't have a clue, really, about how you can read the mind of someone who you don't know walking on the other side of the street. There's capacities for communication and then creative process. I don't experience the mind as impersonal. If I'm working on a project and I go to sleep with questions in the morning,
the contents of the mind are not impersonal, I would say, but the mind is impersonal.
I don't know.
Do you have to arouse awareness, or is it always here?
If I look for it, it's there.
It's always there, right? No matter what. The contents may be yours in particular, and in fact, that's actually another step that I didn't take this morning. But as the mind quiets in meditation, you begin to see more and more into that quality of pure awareness.
Right.
That where there's not any content, there's just this, which is a total mystery. As I read, the scientists don't know what consciousness is. The mystics basically just bow down to it and say, this magical thing that knows of everything and everything appears in it, and it's a cause for sort of deep reverence, I would say, but I don't think that it has any personal quality. It is universal. We share the universal mind. I'd like to think of it that way.
So are you saying that humor is a frontal lobe function?
Well,
it seems very personal and very mental. I don't need to get on this, but I think scientists have missed so much. I once asked an astronomer at a college reunion, and they were going to study the cosmos with red spectrum light, and they were finding a ton more out there than they'd ever seen before.
Yeah.
And I asked them, had they been able to incorporate the images of the Hubble telescope? Because when I went to school, there was just the Milky Way. And he said, absolutely not.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah.
It's too big.
It's so
it
amazing.
brings the brains to a halt.
I'll never forget reading in it was mid-90s. They're sending the pictures from the Hubble telescope, and there was an article in the Chronicle, like on this page 6 or something. Hubble telescope takes nickel-sized picture of the sky, finds 20 million new galaxies. Why did all of humanity should have fallen to their knees? Not solar systems, not, galaxies. It's just, and then, of course, we're still caught in this kind of, human-centered idea of creation, that it's all here for us. Everything revolves around us. There is reason to think that maybe the time has come for a bit of desentimentalizing of the human history. Don't get mad. I think we could use it. I
wonder if what Jim was thinking when he said it is that I think there's some of us who have maybe the romantic belief that science can work all it wants to, but it's not going to give the ultimate, answer, information about existence. I don't know whether that's what you're referring to or not, but I just comment that on Jim. My own thing that I was thinking after your talk was how much more locked into the phenomenal observation and belief of it. I keep thinking that I'm getting away from that, but then I was just looking around at everybody, and everybody seems different to me. And that's so hard to break. You look different than the man next to you, and so, I don't know whether I'm programmed or what, but, what I discern are differences, and that seems to be the important thing to my survival. And so, you put that on a cultural level, and you see the chaos that, erupts from that. And I'm just saying that your talk is very provocative in that, I just really have to be humble, in my thinking that I've gotten far away from that. Because, I was just instantly reminded about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. We are unique, and we are, each of us, but I think we tend to over-stress our differences in some sort of existential way. We don't really see how completely the same we are. But I think of the Dharma, and I think of this movement, the messages that I get from it are, number one, that you're not your fault. That's my main message. That we are built out of all the life that came before us, and the more we begin to integrate. It's sort of like evolution is something that almost all of us believe in, but we have not really integrated the information and made it alive in us, which I think is hugely profound, could be a hugely profound shift in our consciousness. And out of that understanding comes compassion and understanding that, we're all just basically doing the best we can, given what we're given. So let me just finish with a poem, all right? Rumi, The Dream That Must Be Interpreted. This place is a dream. Only a sleeper considers it real. Then death comes like dawn. You wake up laughing at what you thought was your grief. And this groggy time we live in, this is what it's like. A man goes to sleep in the town where he's always lived, and he dreams he's living in another town. In the dream, he doesn't remember the town he's sleeping in his bed in. He believes the reality of the dream town. The world is that kind of sleep. The dust of many crumbled cities settles over us like a forgetful doze. But we are older than those cities. We began as a mineral. We emerged into plant life and into the animal state and then into being human. And always we have forgotten our former states, except maybe in early spring when we slightly recall being green again. Humankind is being led along an evolving course through this migration of intelligences. And though we seem to be sleeping, there is an inner wakefulness that directs the dream and that will eventually startle us back to the truth of who we are. A migration of intelligences, an inner wakefulness that directs the dream. Thank you all. It was a delight to share this morning with you. And see you on the path somewhere.
We'll have announcements and then you can lead us in the offering from there. Any announcements of interest to Vipassana?
I'm the host today, so there's some macaroons, Mexican wedding cookies, and in honor of the Sangha, flaming red grapes. If you have tea, please wash your cups. And I will also be coming around with a Donna bowl. We ask for $5 to $8 or $5 to $10, whatever you can afford. And if you're new, there's a sign-up sheet to receive the newsletter, either via email or postal mail. I think that's it.
Yes. Other announcements?
I'm Rick. I've newly returned to the city and I'm seeking a living situation. And it's occurred to me that a Buddhist household or Buddhist-friendly household would be really great. I'm looking for a room, so if anybody knows of anything, that would be great.
Other people who are here for the first time? Welcome. Okay, people make them feel welcome. Great. Okay, at this point, let's stand in a circle and hold hands. And the offering.
With the understanding of how we are similar, all of us wanting happiness, and how our lives intermingle with all living things. We share our merit. May it go for the liberation and ease of everything that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.